Hi guys, it's Noe. Today I am bringing back to you another video on adoption perspective. The last video I did on Adam Krapser's deportation back to South Korea was very well received. I felt very supported. Not that I need to be validated in my own perspectives and opinions, but it was nice to feel supported and to know that there are other people outside of adoptees that feel similar to me about adoption. So I appreciate the love and support and the questions and the dialogue that came from that. So today's video I wanted to share kind of my thoughts or my experiences around racism and how I experienced that. This is relevant to me today because through work I actually got to participate in a presentation by a PhD psychologist who does race relations, racism, cultural competency workshops and trainings. And so this was some professional development that we had the opportunity to attend. And I will say I love working in higher education because of the fact that I get to develop myself. I get to learn more about diversity and social justice issues and how to be an advocate and how to be a social change maker. And so that's something that I really enjoy doing. I've always really enjoyed working with marginalized populations. When we lived in Indianapolis, I worked a lot with the Hispanic community, and mostly the majority of them were Mexican immigrants, most undocumented. And so as a population that I just felt was so rewarding to be able to work with and to help and provide resources for. And so I have also lived life in somewhat of a marginalized identity. I fully understand and accept the privileges that I have, and also being Asian, like, I think we face a different kind of discrimination, but I definitely faced it. So I thought I would share kind of some of the experiences I had growing up and kind of the journey that I took in developing my identity and my identity development. And I will say it's still very much a journey that I am on. And I don't think I'll ever come to like the pinnacle of like, oh, I am fully developed in my identity now. It's ever changing, it's ever evolving, as it should be. And so I encourage you all, if you haven't really dived that deep into like who you are and what makes you you, and why, I encourage you to do so. So she started off the presentation today with a question of, think back to when you were growing up and your family and your relatives and family friends and all of that. How was race talked about in your family? How is racism or race relations, how was that addressed? What was said about it? But more importantly, look at what was not being said about race, racism, race relations, all of that kind of thing. So I thought, and I even shared with the group that like for me, talking about race, like it just was not a thing that we did. You know, I shared a little bit, I think in my very first video about my adoption, is that my identity, I really wasn't allowed to be who I am. Like my identity as a Korean was never really acknowledged. I mean, obviously, yes, I never knew that, or I never assumed that I was white. I always knew that I was Asian or Korean. And so I would get into these arguments about my own identity, about who I am. And my mom would be like, no, you're an American, like you're not a Korean. Like it was something that I should be ashamed of, or that like something that I, you know, was part of my past, but I now needed to leave that behind. And like, I've now become this new person. I've become Noelle instead of Ok Jung, which was my Korean name. And so it was so frustrating to me because I just felt silenced. Like I just learned that I can't talk about this stuff with you. And there really wasn't anybody in my family that I was able to talk about race issues. It wasn't until I got into college that really was I able to talk about race issues, because let's get real. Like, I grew up in a small town in Shelbyville, Indiana, I'll name it. And it's predominantly white, and it's rural Indiana. I mean, I grew up with a cornfield. You okay? Sorry, I got the baby behind me, and she likes to suck on her fists. So I grew up with a cornfield in the back of, backed up to my house. So it was very rural. And there weren't very many Asians. I went to school starting in kindergarten with another girl. Her mom was Filipino, but her dad was white. So I always felt like she was much more accepted than I was. Even though I had a white family, like, she didn't get questions of, who are you with? Or why were you with those people? Like, I used to get questions from my classmates, like, I'd see them at Pizza Hut on Saturday night, and then I'd see them on Monday, and they're like, who are you with? And I'm like, what do you mean, who was I with? Well, who were you with when I saw you? And, hang on. So, I would see them at school on Monday, and they'd be like, who are you with? I'm like, what do you mean? When I saw you at Pizza Hut, why were you with those people? I'm like, my family? And they're like, yeah, but you don't look like them. I'm like, oh. And so it was like always having to explain who I was, why I didn't match my parents. And so the good thing out of that is that really taught me how to be very open about it. It's never anything that I was ashamed of or was trying to hide. That was my reality. That was my lived truth. That I'm adopted, nobody else in my family looks like me, or I don't look like anybody else in my family, but this is my family. So then it would start, like, kids, they'd be like, oh, so, like, you're adopted. So I'd explain, like, well, I was given up as a baby, and then, I was adopted, which means that I was brought over here, and this is now my family. So then they'd be like, oh, how do you like your new family? And I'm like, really? And so I got to the point where, like, even in elementary school, I'm like, you are stupid. I'm sorry, this is like unfiltered Noe. But I'm like, are you serious? And I'd be like, well, how do you like your family? Like, it was the same, like, I don't know, I was a baby. Like, I don't know. Like, my family was no different to me than what their family was to them, except that their family looks like them. And they have pictures when they were in their mommy's tummy and that kind of thing, and I didn't. So that kind of growing up in that environment really forced me to have to be open about it. But I felt like even at a young age, like, I need to school these people on some things. Like, those are stupid questions. But it wasn't always from kids. I mean, again, growing up in a small town, like, I had people in Walmart, because that's the only store that you could shop at then. Hang on. You have things to say, too? Do you have things to say? So, I think, so this was when I was in middle school, probably, and I was stopped by a woman in Walmart, and she was like, oh, she gets down real close to me, to like my level. Hi, how are you? Because if you don't understand English, you need to talk slow and loud and, be very dramatic with, whatever. So I'm like, I know exactly what's going on. So what was happening is that my city, although small and rural, we actually had a sister city in Japan, Canberra, Japan. And so we would host students from the sister city each year, and we actually hosted some exchange students for like a week or 2 weeks at a time. So it was during that time that this was happening. So I knew exactly what she thought. So I'm just sitting there with this like little smile on my face. How do you like America? And I'm like laughing hysterically inside. Again, I'm like 7th grade, so what, that's like 12. And I just kind of let her carry on until she was like expecting me to give her an answer. And I was like, oh, it's pretty cool. I was like, it's all I really know. And she was like, well, I was like, I live here. And she didn't know what to say. So I think she just like left. But I'm like, Really? So it was like all of these kinds of experiences, you know. In elementary school, kids got really mean, and when I was in 5th grade, the teacher had to, the principal actually had to step in, and because kids were calling me, you know, they'd do the slant eyes, they would call me frying pan face, steamroller face, because they said my face was flat. I mean, I'll give you my side profile. Like, my face is not flat, folks, okay? I'm not a 2D drawing. But it was like, they were just being really mean. And so I remember, like, telling my teacher, now I don't remember if my parents knew about this. I mean, if the principal got involved, I feel like my parents had to have known about it. I don't really remember their response. It probably was not that meaningful to me, which is probably why I don't remember. But my principal had to come into our class and like talk to everybody. And mind you, I went to a Catholic elementary school. There were 15 people in my class. I had grown up with these kids and had gone to school with them from the time we were in kindergarten until that point. It was just at that point that they decided to like really get mean, I guess, whatever. And so yeah, so that happened. The principal had to step in about like the words that we use, you know, and then the whole sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That's bullshit, bull crap, whatever, donkey doo-doo, I don't know. But it's like, I've always hated that because I'm like, yeah, words really hurt because you internalize that. A scrape or a cut from a stick or a stone will heal, but words will always remain a wound. And they have to this day. I mean, I'm 34 and I still remember being in those moments. And I'm sure many of you can relate to times when you were bullied or harassed as a kid. And so the fact that my principal had to step in and talk to the whole class, and like, I don't remember having a conversation with my parents about that or anything that was meaningful to me. Like, that's sad. But, you know, again, I dealt with that kind of on my own and was like, whatever. So then I started to kind of get this outlook of like, someday I won't live here. Like, when I go to college, like, that was like my escape of like, when I go to college, like, I don't have to live here anymore. So, you know, middle school was okay. It was just awkward like it is for anybody. Then high school is when it came, you know, and I liked boys. Boys liked me, whatever, sort of. But then, you know, I sort of had a boyfriend, you know, kind of like, will you go with me, kind of one of those things. And his parents knew me. But he was not allowed to let his parents know that we were boyfriend and girlfriend. And again, this wasn't like we actually went on dates or anything like that. But because his parents had such issue with Japs, you know, using that as a derogatory term because of they had family that fought in the Japanese War, or in war, I guess that's World War II. That they had such, you know, like, hate that I was fine if I'm just a classmate, but the moment that I step into that family, potentially, there's an issue. So that's what I ran into in high school. And I just felt like, I don't know, I just felt like nobody really could appreciate, like, I'm not saying I'm the most beautiful person in the world. I'm not saying like I'm drop dead gorgeous or anything like that. Like, I mean, my self-esteem has always been kind of like, okay, you know, I'm here, and have found it surprising when people are like, no, like I'm into you, like Herschel. I'm like, really? So I won the lottery there, but I just always felt like guys just weren't into me because, like, maybe they just, like, the Asian look just wasn't what they were about. Like, they couldn't find, like, similarities. I don't know. I don't know what it was, but I didn't date much in high school. There wasn't as much racism, but there was a lot of the microaggressions, and a lot of the jokes, and, you know, oh, you know, Asians are bad drivers, and, you know, you eat rice, and, you know, and jokes like, I used to joke of like, I love taking pictures. I'm like, well, it's part of my Asian blood, you know? So I would kind of like you know, joke around like that. I never felt like I hated being Asian, but it was like I'd have to make those silly little comments to try to like fit in, or like let me say something about it before you have a chance to hurt me with it. Is kind of, it was a defense mechanism. So then, you know, once I got to college, I'm like, okay, this is great. You know, like I found my people, but I still was I was very uncomfortable around Asian people because I didn't have that experience. I didn't get to have Asian friends. I didn't grow up around that. I had kind of connected with like another family that had adopted children from Korea, but that was when I was like in middle school, and it was awkward. I did, once I get to college, I was working at a restaurant, and there was another Korean working at the same one. This was in Shelbyville, and we found out we were adopted, and we were like, oh, that's so cool, and we like immediately bonded, because anytime you meet another adoptee, it's like you automatically have this connection and this bond. But I still, like, I knew that I was Asian. I knew I was an Asian American. I identified much more just general Asian back then than I do now. Like, now I would say, like, I'm a Korean American. I mean, Asian is a broad term, but now I identify as a Korean American more so than I did back then. So fast forward through college, like I did end up having some Asian friends, but I always felt intimidated. And I think this is something that's common that when I've talked to other adoptees, like I felt like I didn't fully fit in with white people because I'm not white, but I grew up in white culture and white society. So that's what I can relate to on that level. But I never felt like super comfortable around other Asian people because I'm like, I don't know Asian culture. Like, I don't have anything cool to like, or relate to of like when, you know, when they're talking about their Asian moms and like, oh, you know Asian moms. And I'm like, no, I don't. I wish I did, but I don't. So I just felt like, I always felt like an imposter or a fraud of like, I'm not quite this, but I can kind of pass. And I look like this, but I'm having a hard time feeling like I can pass. So it's like living this existence in limbo. And I think that's something that is pretty common among adoptees. So fast forward through college, like I had a lot of fun, made a lot of friends, didn't have any Korean friends. Most of my Asian friends were Filipino. That's mostly, I guess, who was there at school. So I went to a diversity conference. I was working in my first full-time job. I was 23 years old, fresh out of school, and they sent me to a diversity conference because I was doing diversity work, and I'm like, this is great. At that conference, like the very first day, I go to a session, and they're talking about people of color. And I'm like thinking, oh, okay, because to me, people of color were Black or Hispanic or Latino. I never knew that I was considered a person of color. And so when that was like brought to my attention of like, you know, anybody that's not white is considered a person of color, I'm like, that was like an earth-shattering moment for me of like, oh my gosh. And it was a little like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. And then it was a little like, oh my gosh, like I have people, like I'm not alone. And like, it was such a pivotal moment for me in my life and my identity, was understanding and accepting that I was a person of color. And so again, that wasn't until my, you know, early 20s that I started that development of my identity and like understanding who I am and like, you know, the social implications of that and the cultural implications of that. So I think that's part of the reason why I've enjoyed the work that I do. You know, I do have the privilege of understanding white culture and being a part of that. So I feel like I've been afforded some maybe more privileges than if I was an immigrant directly from Korea. But I think that's why identity is so important to me now and for the girls. One, because we have to navigate race relations in this country with them. Because they are part Black and they are part Asian. from a, you know, they both know, and she will know that they're Blasian, and to be proud of that, and to be proud of who they are, and that I will never take their identity from them. And whether they choose to identify more with being Asian or more with being black, like, that's totally up to them. That's for them to discover and to learn and explore. That's not for me to dictate who they are and who they identify as. And that was something that I was not afforded and I was not given, so I will never take that away from them. So that's why the work that I do is important for me, but also important for them, because I'm raising three future members of society who can also be social change agents. So I feel like this has kind of been a bit of a rambling video, but hopefully you can kind of see like some of the issues that I have faced and how that has helped shape my identity. You know, Herschel did the video about are Korean women mean, or something like that, and there was a lot of commentary coming back of like, well, you're not really Korean, you're American, so it's hard to compare. And I just, you know, I got into it with a couple of people, and I was like, I don't know how to respond to this, so I guess this is my response. I just felt like those people, I get it. I get the idea of what they're saying, that like, yes, I'm not culturally Korean, so I don't have the cultural norms and social norms as a Korean national or a Korean immigrant would have. So I get that. I fully understand that. But for somebody to tell me that I'm not Korean, like, that is what struck a chord with me of like, you are not going to take my identity away from me. Like, I've spent too much of my life of people trying to say, no, you're this, not that. And it's like, no, I'm telling you, myself, this is my skin. I'm telling you what I am and who I am. So that's kind of where I felt coming at that. It's like, but I am Korean. So I get it from the standpoint of like, yes, I didn't grow up with the social norms of Korean norms and Korean culture and Korean rules and all of that. I get that. But I don't want anybody to ever take away my identity and tell me, no, you're this, not that. Because this is how I've chosen to identify. I'm an Asian American. I'm a Korean American woman. So with that, hopefully that gave you a little more insight. I have many more topics to talk about, kind of the adoption perspective, but really wanted to make this video today just because it felt relevant to me, and I've kind of been doing some more work in my head in terms of why I do the work professionally, and why it's important to me as a human and as a mother and as a wife to a black man in this world, in this society. So I encourage you all to, if you are not working in diversity, to really think about that. And a lot of people think that it's okay to have the colorblind ideology, and that is the most damaging thing that you can have. Because when you say, I don't see color, I just see you as a person, you're not seeing me as a person, because you're not seeing that I have these beautiful differences from you, and so has these beautiful differences from that. Like, so you cannot go through this life telling people that you're colorblind, because you're telling them that that part of you is not okay to see, so that I only see you as this part. Like, do not say, if you learn one thing from me, please, please, please do not practice a colorblind viewpoint, because you are not allowing that person to be fully that person. So I can do another video kind of on race relations and stuff, because that's kind of veering down another road. But I wanted to get this out. Hopefully you learned something more, and if anything, you know, take some time to reflect inward about who you are and what you're doing and why you're doing that. So I'll see you guys later. Thanks. Bye.